Pikmin, comparatively to many of Nintendo's games, is very interesting. With its humble origins as Mario 128 and to its full bloom as Pikmin, the journey to this game's inception was definitely not normal, almost as abnormal as the situation Olimar is thrust into. As Olimar was flying his spaceship, as one does, he unfortunately has an abnormality in his flight and is hit by a meteor. This forces him to crash land on an unknown planet, which leads us to the first level of Pikmin, the impact site. The impact site is very impactful on the rest of the game, and in Olimar's journey of getting off this unknown planet. As soon as Olimar wakes up on this unknown planet, we get to see his inner monologue of what is rushing through his mind. Many thoughts are shown to us, but the main one that sticks out is that he's surrounded by poisonous gas called oxygen. Everyone who plays this game instantly might just assume that he breathes carbon dioxide or nitrogen. However, clearly they haven't taken into account everything we've been given so far. If we look at Olimar in his stature compared to a simple flower, we find that he is abnormally short. However, we find from his voice lines we see in Pikmin 2 Olimar, that despite his tiny vocal cords, he still has an extremely deep voice. This must mean that the Hoctatian race breathes sulfur hexafluoride. This constantly keeps their voice deep and counteracts their natural high pitch. After Olimar witnesses the miracle of life with his first set of red Pikmin, he decides to branch out to hopefully find something that can allow him to plan out his current predicament. This leads him to a carton with the number 10 on it. While 10 is the number of Pikmin required to move the carton, it also would make sense that this number would be labeling the amount of objects originally stored inside of this carton. This information can help us derive what the carton was supposed to hold, and unfortunately, it's pretty obvious what was being stored when this carton was in use. The only objects that come in cartons of 10 of this relative size would be cigarettes. Why Nintendo decided to put such an uneco-friendly object in a game about little plant guys is unknown, but disturbing nonetheless. After Olimar retrieves the engine, not much is left to retrieve without enlisting the help of yellow Pikmin and blue Pikmin, so Olimar sets out and comes back with his newly acquired Plantmin to retrieve another ship part. However, little did Olimar know that on odd-numbered days, as opposed to even-numbered days with the Mamuta, the Gulix is a massive threat to his Pikmin population, only sparing blue Pikmin from its dangerous watery body. However, weirdly enough, no matter how hostile the Gulix is, clearly it shares a similar goal to the Mamuta, taking shifts daily guarding the specific stump from intruders. So this brings up the question, why is this stump so important to these creatures? The only logical answer is that they both really enjoy the comfort this stump provides and don't want their happy place to be invaded. The tiny clam oasis we find in the back of the impact site is home to 2 clams enjoying their day. However, weirdly, one of them has latched onto our positron generator and holds it inside of its mouth. This is odd, especially considering clams usually have pearls like we see in the clam right next to it. What seems to have happened is the clam on the left was unable to form its own pearl, but seeing his friend have one, got jealous and insecure about not having a pearl of his own. This caused him to look for something shiny to fill his mouth with to fit in, which coincidentally was our positron generator. Back at the site of our impact, we can find a tiny pile of sticks. These piles, when utilized by the Pikmin, can allow Pikmin to reach higher heights for utility purposes, such as getting a pellet as we see here. However, this simple action gives us insight on a hidden ability of all Pikmin. It seems as though Pikmin have an incredible control over nature. If you look at the formed piece of wood, it looks as though it was a recently felled log. This means that Pikmin somehow have the ability to combine multiple separate pieces of wood seamlessly into a log that is indistinguishable to a natural one. After retrieving his engine in the impact site, Olimar heads out into the upper atmosphere, taking a gander at the planet he has crashed onto. After his gander has been taken, he decides the best course of action would be to search for more ship parts in a part of the planet he dubbed the Forest of Hope. With its forest aesthetic and a bulborb, let's see what you couldn't miss. As soon as we break ground on this new forest, we run into 2 dwarf bulborbs prodding the ground for food. While usually this is done near plants, here we see the dwarf bulborbs seemingly prodding with no clear reason as to why. However, if we look directly to the right, we find the eternal fuel dynamo. Due to its eternal properties, it must have been generating excess fuel that slowly seeped into the soil around its resting place. This must mean that the dwarf bulborbs were prodding not only for food, but for the excess jet fuel as well. This tells us that dwarf bulborbs can gain nutrients from fuel, but also enjoy the taste and treat it as a delicacy. The Forest of Hope is home to many of Olimar's parts, but more importantly than any of those parts is the Yellow Onion, home of the yellow Pikmin. Yellow Pikmin are practically the inverse of red Pikmin. Instead of a long nose, they have long ears, and instead of having massive muscles, they are lightweight. But one difference is not like the others. Like how many animals are natural hunters, yellow Pikmin are natural bombers, knowing their way around explosives like the back of their hand. While this fact is very odd, the evolutionary conditions that required this adaptation to occur in the yellow Pikmin must have been even more odd. One can only imagine what threats they must have come against to require evolving into bomb specialists. Olimar, realizing he needs more help, leaves and comes back with blue Pikmin companions. Utilizing their ability, we are able to retrieve the shock absorber from across a small spring, but before we acquire it, we come across a Bulborb sleeping next to it. These creatures are usually nocturnal, so it's not odd to see them sleeping, but them choosing to sleep here of all places seems to be a severe misunderstanding. This Bulborb must have read the label on the part that calls it a shock absorber, and the Bulborb, since they are constantly shocked awake by dwarf Bulborbs, thought this part would protect him from the shock that would come from being awakened suddenly. However, no matter how absorbent the shock this part is, it can't do anything about psychological shock, leading to the Bulborb being even more shocked than usual when he wakes up to getting attacked by our Pikmin. The mini-boss of the Forest of Hope is the armored cannon beetle. This enemy is the obstacle blocking the radiation canopy from our grasp. However, he doesn't do a very good job of keeping it away from us. Due to his heavy body and all-or-nothing boulder attack, many of his movements often lag behind many of the actions the Pikmin take. Missing attacks would make you think he would decide to evaluate his strategy and maybe change it up, but the armored cannon beetle actually relishes in his over-the-top attacks and style. If we look closely at its face, clearly its mouth is open in excitement to show off its flashy attacks. The main boss of the Forest of Hope is the burrowing Snagrid. This enemy is very ironic, being the only bird enemy in the game, and instead of being able to fly, it burrows under the ground to avoid the Pikmin's onslaught. However, irony aside, the burrowing Snagrid is one of the only bosses to have another of its species in the same radius. This can cause this fight to get very messy if both attack you at once. However, the fact that there are two Snagrids begs the question of what they were doing before we arrived. Judging by the season of the Forest of Hope, this would be around the time mating season would start for the birds. This must mean Olimar disrupted these two Snagrids during a sacred moment. This wouldn't matter too much if it wasn't for the fact that many birds travel in flocks. So if the word ever got back to the flock that two Snagrids were assassinated during a sacred moment, Olimar's journey would have gotten a lot harder. With the Forest of Hope behind us, we head back to the atmosphere. With our newly acquired parts, we now have the ability to reach farther into this planet than ever before. This leads us into the depths of the Forest Navel. This navel, which they honestly should have just called a cave, is very immense, fiery, and let's see what you couldn't miss. As we delve into the Forest Navel, we find one of the native inhabitants of the navel, the fiery blowhog. This creature to any Pikmin other than red Pikmin is a death sentence, spewing hot flames in a slight cone shape through its trunk-like mouth. This attack, while maybe is just here for gameplay purposes, also gives insight on the biology of the fiery blowhogs. The fact they need to burn their prey before indulging on them is very telling of their immune system. Fiery blowhogs, compared to other animals, cannot digest raw meat or plants thoroughly enough to kill off any harmful bacteria. This means they need to burn/cook their prey, not just because it's convenient, but as a necessity. The Puffstool is one of the most unique mini-bosses we see in Pikmin overall, which is odd considering the fight is barely even a fight at all. This is due to the Puffshroom's weird strategy of running away constantly and only stopping when it has excess spores to spread. Speaking of the spores, these spores weirdly have the ability to take control of our Pikmin for a brief period of time until they are snapped out of it. This attack is very brutal, causing Pikmin to attack their own kind and Olimar himself. However, are they really attacking us? In reality, the controlled Pikmin are not even controlled. The reason they seem to start attacking Olimar and the unshroomed Pikmin is due to every Pikmin's natural fear of hats. When the shroom is on the Pikmin's head, it blocks their leaves and petals, preventing them from photosynthesizing. This causes them to freak out and run towards any ally they see in hopes of removing their shroom hat to prevent them from losing out on precious nutrients. While exploring the navel, Olimar stumbles upon the loaf himself, the bread bug. This bug is a scavenger constantly looking out for leftovers from Olimar's exploits to engorge themselves on. However, comparatively to the fat on other creatures, the fat that the bread bug gains is extremely hard, giving most other creatures a run for their money when looking at armor class. This weird quirk in their biology unfortunately is the bread bug's only saving grace, because in every other area it lacks. This is due to the tunnel vision that is brought about by the bread bug's desire to feed on everything it sees, causing him to be an easy target for apex predators such as the Pikmin. After Olimar and the Pikmin's long struggle with water, the blue onion is here to solve our problem by showering us in blue Pikmin. These little guys were born with gills, giving them the ability to traverse water with ease. Though, why do the blue Pikmin, in addition to having gills, also have a mouth? Every Pikmin type before this has had the ability to speak, but never needed a mouth to do so. And since blue Pikmin also have leaves or petals, they can photosynthesize easily and have no need to eat. Thinking of any other functions of the mouth other than speaking or eating leaves us only to one conclusion. Blue Pikmin, due to being able to live and move freely in water, have had little to no fear of any and all predators. This led to one thing during their evolutionary line that caused more deaths than predators ever could: boredom. This boredom was so immense that blue Pikmin evolved to have a mouth so they could spit water at each other to stave off boredom whenever necessary. The main boss of the Forest Navel is the beady Longlegs. This boss takes the cake for the biggest boss of the game due to its long legs that are its namesake, though even besides its size, it has another very cool feature. The beady Longlegs, if we take a closer look, we can see that it has no eyes anywhere in sight. Clearly this is due to it living in a cave and not needing eyes to survive, but even then, how does it even get close to stomping on our Pikmin without any form of vision? To explain this, we need to look even closer at the beady Longlegs. If you look at every joint this creature has, instead of a solid connection, they are just balls, somehow allowing the limbs to move freely around them. The only mechanism that can possibly emulate this movement would be magnets. Thus, with magnets on its limbs, clearly the beady Longlegs can feel the distortions the Pikmin create on its magnetic field and triangulate their position utilizing this strange technique. With majority of his parts back in tow, Olimar spots one more massive area that he knows will have all but one of his parts to restore functionality to his ship. This area being the distant spring. This distant body of water has an otherworldly feel that makes you truly feel like you're Olimar. So let's spring into this spring and see what you couldn't miss. As soon as we land onto the distant spring, we instantly can gather that this place is filled with water and geometry. While the water is obviously going to be here when spring is in the name, it was very unexpected to see extremely organized and intentional placement of stone walls, paths, and architecture. Clearly this place is not lived in by any life intelligent enough to create such architecture, and even if there was, the overgrowth on all of our surroundings suggests that these structures were built years prior to Olimar's descent onto this place. However, this fact, along with the fossils we find across the first bridge, suggests an even deeper piece of information. From what we know of fossils being created, they usually have a hard time being created and preserved unless inside of a marine environment. This must mean the distant spring used to not be a spring at all, it used to be an ocean or a lake. This excess water was most likely brought about by this planet's ice age years ago, creating a perfect environment for this fossil to form. Though, knowing this also must mean that the architecture we see all around this spring must have also been created underwater, meaning that we must have stumbled upon remnants of Atlantis. Scattered all across the faraway spring are a bunch of puffy blowhogs. These enemies are way different than their counterparts we see in the navel. These blowhogs fly and blow air instead of walking and blowing fire. This offers a nice switch up in game plan required to beat them, but one feature about them seems to be opposite of what would be beneficial. The spikes on the back of the puffy blowhogs seem to make no sense. The only other enemies in the spring that fly are shearwigs and swooping snitchbugs, but clearly these enemies are not of any danger to these massive blowhogs. This leads us to one conclusion: either they're guarding against a massive flying predator we don't know about, or the more likely scenario is to guard against yellow wallywogs. With the wog's massive body weight, if the puffy blowhogs get stomped on by them, they would plummet to the ground, allowing the wogs to freely use their bodies as a trampoline, degrading their pride and leaving the puffy blowhogs demotivated to blow air. A bit of good news for Olimar in the distant spring is that there are no bulborbs to put him in danger. However, that doesn't mean there are no bulbears. Bulbears are almost functionally identical to bulborbs, just with different stats. However, these bulbears are unfortunately some of the most tragic enemies inside of Pikmin. This is due to the rim of the spring being surrounded by walls and water, causing this entire tribe of bulbears to be trapped for eternity within the distant spring. While this is sad, the beautiful thing is the Bulbear tribe accepts their sad reality of their existence and only wants to enjoy their tribe's final few generations in peace. A major discrepancy in this game's realism comes from the fire geysers that somehow are embedded inside the stumps surrounding another armored cannon beetle. This at first seemed odd until I realized azobe wood is extremely resistant to burning. This means after charcoal forms around the geyser itself, the rest of the log becomes impervious. Candy pop buds are mysterious flowers that transform Pikmin into an opposing color depending on the color of the bud. This is really useful in the case of excess Pikmin of a certain type. However, what is going on inside the bulbs, and how do the Pikmin transmute into a new color? In reality, the Pikmin we throw into the flower are not transformed, and the inside of these flowers are actually nectar bars run by the honey wisps. The Pikmin thrown into these bars tag out the Pikmin of that color partaking in the nectar bar to go and aid Olimar. These nectar bars are extremely convenient as well, because even when the 50 replacements stored in each flower are tagged out and the flower withers, the bar automatically teleports all of the remaining opposing color Pikmin to another candy pop bud so that the bar party can continue. Everyone knows of the smoky prog. This creature appears if we make it to the out-of-the-way spring before day 15, and is chilling in his egg on a little archipelago. This creature is very mysterious in its origin, with the only theory being a malformed Mamuta larva. This theory, while we can take it at face value since it was given to us directly, you all know we want hard proof for this theory to be believed, and today I have found that proof. If we remember back to the impact site, it's the only place inside the game we find a Mamuta physically present. This alone is nothing, but the fact that the only Mamuta was also on a stump instantly gives us the proof to this theory. While there are a ton of stumps in the spring, there's one that clearly was the home of the Smoky Prog's mother. It's a conjoined stump that, other than Olimar's empty pilot seat, is vacant of anything else. This empty seat is most certainly a metaphor for a mother being vacant in its child's life, and sadly, the Smoky Prog is left alone to its life without the guidance of its Mamuta mother, which possibly might have led to the Smoky Prog's malformation away from being a Mamuta. With all of Olimar's ship parts acquired but one, we head to the final trial. This simple area is really short, but not as short as this intro. Let's see what you couldn't miss one last time. As soon as we land, we can instantly tell this final area is unlike any area we've ever been in. It fits its namesake perfectly, having 3 trials for Olimar and his Pikmin to solve. Though, who created this trial for Olimar, and why? While there's no mention anywhere in the game or its files of someone who would do this, clearly someone has been pulling some strings. This must be the case because all these coincidences don't add up. We have seen many parts perfectly stationed near strong wildlife, no parts that would be strongly attached stayed attached, and the original meteor that hit our ship when we were so small, that must have been a planted asteroid. So with all the evidence against them, who is the culprit? Many will just leave it at fate bringing Olimar to this planet, but when we think about it, many of the parts are in places only a flying creature or object could reach, especially taking into account the meteor. This must mean the onions caused all these events to occur, with the reasoning being them simply wanting someone to guide and teach their Pikmin children how to thrive on their own. All around the ridge of this area are a surplus of bombs for the yellow Pikmin to utilize. This surplus is not seen in any other level, with almost all areas not having half the explosives we find here. This must mean that the lake here is actually made out of sulfuric acid, and this is what allowed these bombs to form. The explanation for how Olimar survives this acid is easy, since his spacesuit is clearly extremely advanced and protective. However, the fact that Pikmin survive and thrive in this acid clues us into 2 amazing facts about Pikmin. 1, they are immune to the burning effects of sulfuric acid, and 2, they can rebalance their pH levels anytime it's thrown off from an outside source like sulfuric acid. One of the trials has many fire geysers, and by now we would know about the red Pikmin's immunity to fire. We might as well take a look at their race as a whole. Red Pikmin compared to every other Pikmin type are the strongest, doing the most damage, and if that wasn't enough, as we just said, they are completely immune to fire. Though, just as with the blue Pikmin with their mouths, we have to wonder what event caused them to have a nose. While clearly the nose is what gains them their extra attack power, allowing them to utilize it as a spike, I highly doubt this evolution was caused just by that fact. Due to their immunity to fire, red Pikmin usually are very cold. While this doesn't bother them, they, as do everyone, enjoy the feeling of being warm. This for red Pikmin usually occurs only when exposed to flame, which means the red Pikmin must have evolved a nose so they can smell and lead themselves to smoke from fire, which not only gives them comfort, but also puts them in a carbon dioxide-rich environment for photosynthesis. The final boss of Pikmin is the Emperor Bulblax. This giant creature is incredibly strong, hiding itself inside the ground and emerging with ease. This fight is pretty simple, just a loop of causing the Bulblax to eat a bomb and then utilizing the opening that causes to fight back. However, by the looks of it, the Emperor Bulblax is very old, with plants growing out of its back and skin drooping very low and untaught. I sadly believe the Emperor Bulblax didn't even intend on eating Olimar's ship part. As we all age, our eyesight is definitely one of the traits that will deteriorate the fastest, and if we look at the Bulblax's attacks, clearly he attacks in a wide range due to him only seeing blurs and not clear figures. This must mean that when the Bulblax ate the ship part, he was hoping it was a shiny drop of nectar that was frozen, not a massive piggy bank. The final part of Olimar's ship we need to come back for due to nighttime is the secret safe. This part, while not required for Olimar's ship to function, means so much to Olimar that he risked fighting the Emperor Bulblax to get it. This must mean that much more than just money has to be stored inside of this safe. Though the list of items it could be is massive, due to the slot of the safe being small, it narrows it down a little. It's too small for anything like precious gemstones or gold bars to fit, so other general valuables like that can be crossed off the list. Since Olimar said he would have regretted not retrieving this safe if he didn't get it in time, and considering he has a family back at home, the safe must also contain many family photo albums, and knowing Olimar's love for his family would cause him to regret losing all those memories. Though, while that may be a part of it, we truly know that Olimar is just attached to his favorite piggy bank and didn't want to lose his favorite pig. And that is the end of what you couldn't miss in Pikmin. If you enjoyed this video, or if you didn't enjoy this video, please interact with this video how you see fit.